each of the subdistricts for 5. They'll be elected for the regents, that is for providing the social services to the district. And there will be 5 with 1 from each subdistrict, so that 5 go elected to the district level. And then those 5 take rounds, and that they will be making joint decisions. Each of these 5, within these 8 offices, they will all be making decisions based upon vote of the 5, with the chiefs presiding. So each subdistrict will be electing a world district auditor to perform the role of checking, of auditing all of the processes within the district. And from among them, they will be taking rounds to serve. One as a chief auditor for the district. And then the youth representatives will also, from among the youth, in that youth vote is a straw vote, but they do, it is the youth that elect themselves, not the adults. The persons 14 through 17 years of age who might serve as youth representatives are elected by the population of those youth 14 through 17. This is part of an educational process, so that by the time young people are 17 or 18 years old, by the time they're 18 years old, they're familiar with the overall system. So, hello, Dr. Martin.
Good morning. Good morning, Eugenia. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Dr. Glenn.
Good morning, Dr. Glenn.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, how's it been going so far?
Going great, sir.
Going well?
Yes,
Okay,
very
Eugenia,
well.
are you going to wrap up? Or
I'll wrap up. And actually, we just were finishing. I was introducing to the class, to the program, the participants, the structure and function of the world districts.
I see.
And pointing out how the world districts are to operate as cooperative systems, and how the world district structure reflects almost exactly the structure at a world level in how it operates.
Yeah, very good.
And how the residents, the adult residents of the world district, have a meaningful voice in the electoral process. We pointed out how that a judge will be elected from a judicial precinct, and there may be more or less 4 lock adults participating in that vote for the world precinct judge. And that judge then serves as a judge in the world district court. And how from among perhaps 8 lock adult residents in a subdistrict, all of the other 8 functions, they elect officers for the other basic 7 functions of the world district.
Okay, very good. Excellent.
So,
good to hear that. So are we ready to look at sustainability, the whole question of sustainability? Shall we proceed to that? Yes, Eugenia? Yes?
yes, we should.
Yeah, okay.
If we're ready, we can go and proceed to that.
Okay.
those of you who are interested can read the World District Standard. The World District Standard is a public document and readily available to everyone. And I think we can move on now to the sustainable development section of the class of today's presentation.
Okay, can you see that? Can you see the screen?
Yes, it is visible. Yeah.
Okay. So, here we're talking about, Eugenia and I are talking about sustainability, the U.S. Sustainable Development Goals, and comparing that with the Earth Constitution system. And I think it will reveal why, here we are in the year 2023, the UN Sustainable Development Goals are in force from the year 2015 to the year 2030. They're supposed to be achieved by the year 2030. So we're halfway through that process, and the world is not much closer to sustainability than it was 7 years ago. And it's not going to, obviously, it's not going to succeed by the year 2030. So I think we'll be able to see why in this presentation. And so we've been talking in the last two classes about the paradigm shift, a fundamental shift in our thinking on this planet, from fragmentation to holism, from national sovereignty to world citizenship, and that's what this slide is about, and it gives us ultimately, as we're seeing, the Earth Constitution gives us a peace system, a justice system, and a sustainability system. These goals have to be embedded within the system itself if we want it to be successful. This is just a bibliography of some of the things that I've published on sustainability and the critique of the SDGs. My forthcoming book, Human Dignity and World Order, has a chapter on that. And my last book, The Earth Constitution Solution Designed for a Living Planet, has 3 chapters on that. And then there have been several articles. Number 3, 4, 5, and 6 are articles that I've published on this topic. And then number 7, The Anatomy of a Sustainable World, is a book I published on this in the year 2013. So here is a basic diagram. It is found in the works of Herman E. Daly, but it's also found online. In general, it's not an uncommon diagram. We can see here when the capitalism first began in the world, way back in the 16th century, 17th century, people began to realize they could make investments, and these investments could result in productivity and consumption among people, and the investor would get a return on the investment. That's the capitalist model. And in the 16th and 17th century, the situation with the difference between the economy and the global ecosystem was in the upper diagram. Right? If the large oval is the ecosystem of our planet, the global economy was minuscule, was very small. So in the 16th and 17th century, they were discovering what seemed like endless forests, endless mineral deposits around the world, endless fresh water systems flowing through the streams and the rivers and in the frozen in the glaciers and so on. It seemed like the world had this unlimited capacity to supply the what you could see on the left is the matter and the energy. The matter would be logging from trees or mining from the mining industry, and energy, burning the trees or burning coal and fossil fuel. It seemed like there was limitless energy and matter and resources on the one hand into a relatively small economy compared to the global ecosystem. And then at the other hand, they did not worry in those days about pollution. They when they burned the wood for heat and energy, the heat produced by the wood, the smoke and the pollution seemed to just disappear into the environment, and it was not thought about. And the same with the matter, the waste matter, the from the chemicals they were using and so on. They just would dump them into the local river, and they didn't worry about it. It seemed like it would just be absorbed. So the economy was small, and if one thinks in terms of the distinction between natural capital and human-made capital, right? What natural capital is all of the resources in the ecosystem that are available to human beings to use in their economy, to thrive, to produce goods and services that we need for life on Earth. Man-made capital, human-made capital, is what is produced by investment. Much of the investment in the economy, they're producing saws and making sawmills to cut down the forests, right? That's human-made capital. It's the tools and the products that we have created through our industrial processes in order to serve human needs. They have utility for human needs. And so when in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, when the economy was small in relationship to the ecosystem, what human beings needed was capital investment in the tools and in the infrastructure, in the roads, in the bridges, and all the things necessary for an economy. And so the economy was growing. Production was of these things, making these tools, creating industries, creating systems by which human beings could produce more and more of the products they needed for flourishing. And so the economy was growing, and what was needed for investment was precisely those tools that the man-made capital products. Today, we are in the full world at the bottom. Full world means the economy has grown to every corner of the planet. There are no more endless forests that are unexplored. No more mountain ranges full of minerals that are unexplored. Right? We have a full world now. And the economy is now so large, as we all know, that the ecosystem that supports it is endangered. And so in a full world, and this is what the sustainable economists write about, like Herman E. Daly write about, in a full world, we don't need more sawmills and more chainsaws for cutting down the forests. We have plenty of those. What is limited is the forests. Right? What is limited now is the natural capital. We see that we have to preserve forests. We have to invest in renewable forests and so on, because more, it doesn't matter how many sawmills we have if we don't have the forests to supply the wood. Building more sawmills is useless, right? The same with all the aspects of the investment that originally in the top diagram, where the economy is small, we need more fishing boats, right? There are vast oceans full of fish, and people need to have shipbuilding industries and bigger and better ships and more efficient nets for catching the fish. And that was built, and that was built, and that was built. But now we're in the bottom full world, and the oceans are becoming depleted. In fact, the global fish catch has been diminishing every year since the 1980s, since the mid 1980s. Every year, right? So now more fishing boats, our investment in a free market system, so to speak, our investment can't be in more fishing boats. We don't need more fishing boats. We need more fish, more natural capital. So the investment must be altered. It cannot be in the kind of growth model, indiscriminate growth model that has guided capitalism all the way through. That growth model has ended, permanently ended. You can't have, as the economists say, you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. Okay, so that's what this explanation slide does. It tells us in the first bullet point, the world is moving away from an era in which man-made capital was the limiting factor, right? In other words, we needed more and more man-made capital, more saws to cut down the forest, more fishing boats, to an era in which the remaining natural capital is a limiting factor, right? Now we're limited by the environment. We see now that we're dependent on this shrinking global environment, and more fishing boats are not going to help us. More sawmills are not going to help us. So the third bullet point, we have moved from a world of natural capital empty of man-made capital and people to a world relatively full of the latter and empty of the former. Instead of maximizing returns and investing in man-made capital, as was appropriate in an empty world, we must now maximize returns and invest in natural capital. And so there's the fundamental principle of sustainability. Okay, so here's a question. What's the difference between an empty world and a full world, as the sustainable economists are articulating this? Anybody? We need some response.
Sir, I would like to respond.
Okay, thank you.
So, in a full world, nothing is unexplored. We have utilized almost all the natural resources.
Yes. Good. And yes, and it's as you're suggesting, in an empty world, just the opposite. There we have plenty of resources,
Yeah,
and the purpose of investment is to create more man-made capital. Now we have to look at things entirely differently. That's correct. Thank you. So we, this is called overshooting, right? We're in overshoot. We have overshot the Earth's carrying capacity, the capacity of the global ecosystem to carry and support human life and activities. So here's a quote from the ecologist Lester Brown, well-known ecologist. He says, humanity's collective demands first surpassed the Earth's regenerating capacity around 1980. By 1999, global demands on the Earth's natural systems exceeded sustainable yields by 20%. Right, the yields from fishing in the oceans, the yields from cutting down the forests, the yields from mining, and so on, exceeded, and the yields that could be produced by a a global ecosystem that produces the rains for us and the regular seasons for us. All of this, we're exceeding its capacity to do those things. So ongoing calculations, he says, show that it at 50% by the year 2007. Otherwise stated, it would take 1.5 Earths to sustain our current consumption. Environmentally, the world is in overshoot mode. So we've got to, not only have we got to convert to emphasizing natural capital and sustaining a global ecosystem and repairing it and regenerating it, we've got to shrink. We've got to actually shrink. If we're and that he wrote that in 2011. If we're now here more than 10 years later, it's worse now. And so the global growth process, the global number of people on the planet has got to shrink. By this estimate, the carrying capacity of our planet is about 5 billion people. And the experts discuss that issue, whether it's 5 billion or 6 billion. There's some say that it can carry 9 billion, even as we're going to hit within 10 years or so. But there are others who say it's 2 billion. But the point is that there is a carrying capacity somewhere in there, right? You just can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. And the number of people, every person needs food, clothing, shelter, and resources. And the number of people has a direct impact on the carrying capacity of the planet. So today we've surpassed 8 billion people, continue climbing at a very rapid rate. And there's not likely to be a sustainable global economy without corresponding efforts at an economy of scale. That's what these ecologists are calling it, an economy of scale. In other words, we have to scale our global economic system to the carrying capacity of the planet. We have to have the proper scale. We can't go beyond the carrying capacity of the planet, or we will degrade the planet and ultimately become extinct. So we need, but scale means we need, as we in a little while with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and so we need just distribution. We can't have 1% of the planet owning 50% of its wealth, and we need voluntary population control. Easily done if we had the will to do it. As many population control experts say, all you need to do is have worldwide education for women and girls and availability of contraception worldwide, and a population conscious of the need to not to just indiscriminately increase the population. And that's what, in the Earth Constitution is full of provisions for doing exactly that. So here's a very short definition of sustainability by Herman E. Daly, the environmental economist, who has been such an influence here in the United States. Development without growth beyond environmental carrying capacity, where development means qualitative improvement and growth means quantitative increase. Okay, so in this definition, we need development. We need a market. We need to continue development, but the development cannot be absolutely cannot be beyond environmental carrying capacity. That's the scale, the proper scale of our global economy. And so development, he says, means now qualitative improvement. How can we improve efficiency? How can we develop systems of recyclability? How can we improve the durability of our goods and services so that they don't fall apart and end up in the trash or the garbage within a year or two? Growth means quantitative increase, right? Growth in GDP, gross domestic product, and GNP, growth in gross national product. Can't have that on a worldwide scale. You know, there could be limited local growth here and there, sure, but on a worldwide scale, we are in a full world, and growth is already, we're beyond the carrying capacity of the planet, according to most theorists. So we looked at this slide yesterday, the various, the economic Organization of Economic Cooperation, the G20 that's coming up, meetings coming up in India, the World Trade Organization, BRICS and the Shanghai Corporation. Are all of those concerned with growth? Even BRICS, which wants to remove itself from the domination of the US dollar and is exploring ways to have direct trade between Russia and India and Brazil and so on. Is that direct trade going to be directed toward growth, even though it's dollar-free trade? And I suggest that the dominant ideology of the world is growth. It's going to be very difficult for us to look at things differently. So, question period 2. First question, what is sustainability in Daly's definition? And what is its view of economic growth? Anybody? Saying sustainability is what? Development? What kind of development?
Shall I?
Yes. Yes,
Sir, it
please.
means there is a development. That means qualitatively there is an improvement. However, that development is beyond environmental capacity.
Yeah, the development, the qualitative improvement should not be beyond, should not be beyond environmental carrying capacity, right? Which in growth, quantitative growth is beyond the environmental. So we have to be focusing on qualitative development, not quantitative growth. Yes, very good. Anybody else have any questions so far? Or any thoughts?
Professor Glenn, I have one question.
Yes.
What's the difference between MDGs and SDGs? I mean, Millennium Development Goal and Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, very good. We'll look at in just a moment at the history of when we get to the SDGs, we'll look at the history of the UN concerns for the environment. And there's been various meetings. Well, the Millennium Development Goals were developed by the UN, and they were supposed to be in force from the year 2000 to 2015. So they were a set of goals that are not all that different from the SDGs, but they were less comprehensive and less focused on specifics of the world system. But by the year 2015, the UN realized that the Millennium Development Goals were not successful. And so it determined that the reason why they were not successful is because they were not specific enough and comprehensive enough. So the UN worked to develop a more comprehensive and more specific set of goals, 17 main goals, 169 sub-goals that it came out with for the year 2015 to year 2030. Okay, so they're not different. It's the same goal of sustainability, but the Millennium Development Goals are less sophisticated, less comprehensive. The question that we're looking at here today is, was the UN right that the only problem was that its goals were not comprehensive enough? Or are there other reasons why the Millennium Development Goals failed? Okay.
Thank you, Professor Glenn. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions before we move on? Okay.
I was just thinking that we should keep in mind when the Sustainable Development Goals were published or decided and published, and be aware of the rate at which the implementation of these goals are being implemented. So I think you already addressed the rate at which they're being implemented or not implemented.
Yeah, and we'll look at them in some detail in a couple of slides. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So one distinction that is made by Hermione Daly and others is this difference between allocation, distribution, and scale. Right, and markets allocate goods, and the idea is that they can allocate goods efficiently because there's a process of supply and demand, right? And so when there's demand, then if you have a market system, the market responds by trying to fill that demand, and as the marginal cost and marginal utility of fulfilling that demand diminish, the marginal cost goes up and the marginal utility diminishes, then the demand recedes and the market goes elsewhere in different demands. But the markets cannot give us just distribution. Our world system, as we've been looking at it in the last couple of classes, shows us that. If markets could give us just distribution, we wouldn't have 1% of the world's population owning 50% of its wealth, while 1 billion people in the world live in desperate poverty, right? So governments, it's often thought that it's the job of governments to promote just distribution. They can tax the rich, they can have programs for employing the poor, or giving health care to the poor, or housing to the poor, and so on. That they can use a number of their means for their authority of governments to effect just distribution. But scale is something that classical economics doesn't even talk about. Classical economics has a model in which they draw on the resources, and they trace a product of development of these resources through investment and industrial production and transportation and consumption and then disposal. But scale is this new concept that has come up in the last 50 years, that we cannot have endless growth on a finite planet. Our collective economy on the planet has to be scaled to the carrying capacity of the planet. And that's the third bar on this slide. Neither allocation nor distribution programs can affect scale, because scale requires a worldwide system carefully attuned to all human economic activities. Scale can only be achieved through global system coordinating local and global data. Okay, now, what your well-known Indian activist Vandana Shiva has written about specifics of the issue between capital and the interests of capital and the rights of people and the ecological system. And here in her book Water Wars, Vandana Shiva writes, the water crisis is an ecological crisis with commercial causes, but no market solutions. Market solutions destroy the earth and aggravate inequality. The solution to an ecological crisis is ecological, and the solution to injustice is democracy. Ending the water crisis requires rejuvenating ecological democracy. Now, she's referring not only to the water crisis in India, which she goes into in detail, but she says it applies worldwide as well. What the Earth Constitution, one of the things the Earth Constitution has done with respect to this question of scarcity, like water scarcity, is in the Grassroots Regeneration and Family Planning Act of 2015 that I mentioned yesterday, and you can find online. So she goes on to say in the third bullet point, water rights as natural rights do not originate with the state. They evolve out of a given ecological context of human existence. Right? We're all human beings. We all need water. Every single one of us, whether we're poor or we're rich, also need water. And so we have a natural right to water. And can the market deal with natural rights? Or does it just demand, or does it just respond to who can pay? Right? If you can pay for water, then you get water. But those people who can't pay, they have the same natural rights as the rest. So Shiva writes about the World Bank and so on. She says the World Bank-driven policies of water privatization, another ideology of the recent, the world ideology of economics is largely driven out of the United States, right? The United States has promoted, since the Reagan Revolution, 1980, it's promoted worldwide privatization. And it makes the argument that public services, educational services run by the government, water protection run by the government, and so on, none of that, they say, is efficient. And only everything must be privatized. It's their ideology. And it simply is false. It's not true that there's some things that are better in the public domain than privatized and run with a private idea of making private profit off of. And one of them may be water. Right? So she says World Bank driven policies of water privatization are shifting control from governments to corporations. The centralization of power over water through development projects makes this transition easier. The World Bank, as you know, has been in India creating vast dam projects and vast water projects. With communities bypassed, the World Bank and the indebted governments are making frantic deals with corporations to own, control, and distribute and sell our scarce water resources. In the maquiladoras of Mexico, drinking water is so scarce that baby and children drink Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Coca-Cola's products sell in 195 countries, generating a revenue of $16 billion a year. Water scarcity is clearly a source of corporate profits. So everywhere, for example, I've been in Africa, in many places in Asia and Latin America. You don't want to drink the public water, right? Water that comes through the tap. If there is public water, in Africa, there's no such thing. Water is, you get it from the rivers or the wells and so on. So, but if you want to drink pure water, you have to buy Coca-Cola products or Pepsi products, and they come in plastic bottles. And everybody knows that plastic bottles are single-use produced plastic that are polluting our environment, filling up the ocean, plastic junk, filling up the landfills everywhere in Africa. On every corner, there's plastic junk building up, and the cities and even many of the rural areas are ugly with this plastic garbage trash all over the place. And yet, the corporation has monopoly control over the water. If you want clean water, you have to buy in these bottles. So that's what Vandana Shiva is talking about. And then this is also a quote from her book. She says, the U.S. government considers the transnational corporations' lack of patent protection as unfair trading practice. It does not consider the destruction of regulation for public safety and environmental protection as unethical or unfair for the citizens of the third world. The USA wants to limit and localize laws for the protection of people and universalize laws for the protection of profits. And who makes World Trade Organization rules? You may know that every time there's a meeting of the World Trade Organization, which includes all the countries in the world, the very few largest economies headed by the US meet together in secret ahead of the big meeting. And then at the big meeting, they announce the trade rules that everybody will have to follow. Right? The trade rules are not directed toward equality of wealth for people around the world or eliminating poverty. They're directed toward the profits for multinational corporations that are located in these large countries with economies. And that's why if you look at the UN trade or the UTO regulations, it has page after page after page of TRIPS, trade-related intellectual property right requirements, so that the transnational governments located in the first world have rights that cannot be infringed on when they go to the third world, and have corporate control there, monopoly control, dominate the water systems, dominate the other systems of the third world, and send the profits back to the first world. Not the kind of system that's going to result in either sustainability or global justice. Question 3. What is Vandana Shiva's view of the causes and the solution to the water crisis in India and worldwide? How about that? Can anyone address that question? 80s, the right-wing government, neoliberal economic government of Bolivia, sold the water rights of the people of Bolivia to, to a giant U.S. corporation. I think it was Bechtel Corporation. And then they came, and so Bechtel came in and they owned all the water rights in India. And the first thing they did was make it illegal for people to collect water in rain barrels.
In Bolivia.
Yeah. And it was illegal to have private water, to collect water yourself, because it was now owned by this corporation. And the people of Bolivia rose up in a civic revolution in which they had, in a Gandhi style, they had massive non-cooperation with the government until the government finally retracted this system, privation of water. But that, these are, Vandana Shiva says water scarcity is an ecological problem, and ecological problems are not the same as commercial problems. And she says that neither are natural rights, human rights, the same as commercial problems. Commercial may have its role, right, in the allocation of efficient allocation of resources, but it does not have a role in solving the ecological problem and the distribution problem. Those require something else, right? In addition to the economy. Okay, so sustainable development, here's the conclusion one. Sustainable development is not incompatible with people making commercial profit from their activities within a market system. But the system must include non-market factors of regard for scale and just distribution. Okay, does that make sense? How do we include those non-market factors? Second bullet point, however, sustainable development is incompatible with an economic philosophy placing growth at the center of all solutions.